Good morning again, Todd.
Morning, Joe. We have quorum, Joe, whenever you want to start.
That sounds good. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. We'll call this meeting to order. Today's January 13th, 11:30. This is the Executive Committee meeting for the MPO. Item number 2 is vote on the approval of the agenda.
Hi, this is Sarah, and I just had 2 comments. I had requested at both of those meetings attention from legal counsel, and those just were not included in the meeting minutes. And then also, if Scott is on, he has a specific term he used about working with Lincoln Savings Bank, about partnering with them. Should we have to find a new contractor? I don't see that listed either, and I thought that was a very important comment. If you could clarify what that term is and if we could include those, that would be great.
Is that for item 3, Sarah, the approval of the meeting minutes, or item 2? The agenda.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you said the meeting minutes.
Just move. How about this? You move item 2 and we'll move on to your next question.
Okay, well, I'll move the agenda.
Second, Reva.
All All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 3 is the approval of the meeting minutes. Todd, you want to address some of the mayor's questions, please?
Oh, certainly we can get those added in and get Scott's term added into about working with Lincoln Savings Bank added to the minutes.
Perfect, thank you.
With those changes, I'd move item 2.
Item 3?
Item 3, excuse me.
We're all agenda item off.
Second, Stephanie.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 4 is report and vote on the TAP criteria and schedule. I think Shiroshi's going to give us a brief update on that.
Yes, thank you. So as you all know, we started working on updating the scoring criteria for TAP applications a few months ago. And we began this process with a few goals in mind. And mostly we're trying to update the scoring criteria to bring it in line with our long-range transportation planning goals. Additionally, we wanted to kind of refine and update the criteria to make it more objective, reduce redundancies and that kind of thing. Additionally, we wanted to improve the process to make it more efficient and less time consuming, as well as add the option for safe routes to school projects to be able to score within that criteria. So with that, as you can see, the criteria have several topics under them, and largely they stay the same with the updated criteria. We did add a couple new topics, including health and environmental sustainability, as well as safety, under which projects are able to get additional points if they address that. Next slide, please. So we began a review process for the proposed updates. As you can see, with the initial review, there were several MPO committees that reviewed the document and provided us input, and we tweaked the scoring table and came up with a final draft based on the input that we received from the various committees. Following that, we went through another additional round of review, and as you can see, we took it back to the Bike Ped Roundtable, the Des Moines Trails and Greenways Committee, the Environment Roundtable, as well as the STBG Funding Subcommittee. So we haven't received any further input on the final draft. So at this time, we are bringing that forward again. If you could go to the next slide, please. And this is the schedule that we are proposing. We are expecting an approval of the proposed scoring criteria and the safe routes to school category. And following approval, we would like to open up the fiscal year 2025 application on January 22nd with a tentative application deadline on February 26th. Following the receipt of the applications, the TAP process will follow the STBG schedule, which includes providing presentations to the funding subcommittee and award announcements and so on. Additionally, if projects do end up receiving Safe Routes to School funding, they are required to apply for the state portion by October 1st, which is always the deadline for the fiscal year that the project is programmed in. So for instance, if the project is programmed in fiscal year 21, the deadline to apply to the state would be October 1st, 2021. So with that, if you have any questions about the TAP criteria and the proposed schedule, I'll be happy to answer at this time. Otherwise, we are seeking an approval of this item. Thank you.
Thanks, Hiroshi. Any questions for her? I appreciate the extra work that you guys done on this, talking to the extra committees. I would, if there's no questions or comments, I would entertain a motion.
Move. Second.
Any other discussion?
Was it Chris making the motion? Thank you.
McCoy,
Thanks, Al.
second.
Yeah, got that. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 5 is report and optional vote on the executive director's annual review and compensation adjustment. I don't know, Matt or Sarah, do you guys want to address this?
Sure, I'm happy to address this. So we now have the objectives for the next year from the director. And so what I will be doing is compiling those objectives in with the review materials. Then the 3 of us on the review committee will review those materials, discuss. Then we will meet with Todd Ashby to discuss, and then they will be ready to present to exec and then policy. But at this time, there is no recommendation.
Okay, you'll have that ready for us next month, if all goes well, correct? Between you and Ted and Matt.
Yeah, and I received the objectives the day before the agenda came out, so that's why they're not ready for this executive committee meeting.
All right. So Scott, do we just move to continue this, or what how do you want me to go about this?
Since it's an optional vote, you don't have to take action on it. You can just
Right.
move on
Okay.
to this item.
It's just more informational at this point.
All right, then we'll move on to item number 6. If we don't have any other comments, item number 6 is report on the draft 2017-2021 safety performance targets. I believe Z is going to give us an update on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this is to update everyone on the 2020 safety performance and also to have a look at the 2021 targets. So just going into some background on the safety targets. This is part of the Federal Highway Administration's Highway Safety Improvement Program. State DOTs and MPOs annually report their safety performance measures. These performance measures include the number of fatalities, the rate of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, the number of serious injuries, the rate of serious injuries per 100 million VMT, and also the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries. Next slide. Thank you. MPOs can either agree to support the state DOT's target, or they can establish more specific targets for their MPO planning area. So based on previous target setting by the MPO, we're continuing to establish more specific targets for our area for the 2017 to 2021 period. Next slide. Current regulations use this term safety targets, but MPO committees have expressed that they do not approve of this term targets when we talk about crashes, fatalities, and serious injuries. MPO committees have still approved of setting safety performance targets while maintaining that the use of this term is not appropriate. Next slide. So taking a look at the 2020 safety performance, in 2020, there were 38 reported fatalities. That's up from 35 in 2019. There were 138 serious injuries, which is down from 172 in 2019. And there were 27 non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, which is also up from 23 in 2019. Next slide. So kind of putting those recent 2020 numbers in a historic 10-year context. In terms of 5-year averages for fatalities, we have been seeing fatalities decrease earlier, but now in more recent years, we are seeing a increase in the number of fatalities. Next slide. However, in terms of serious injuries, historically, we have been seeing a downward trend in serious injuries, and we're continuing to see that now. Next slide. The same with non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Historically, we are seeing that trend downwards. Next slide. So this is a look at the draft 2017 to 2021 safety targets. The targets are in the column on the right. You'll notice that the fatality rate and the serious injury rate is to be determined. we're working with the Iowa DOT to get the most updated vehicle miles traveled numbers for 2020, and those aren't ready yet. So once those are ready, we'll update those rates. Next slide. So this is just a timeline of what has been done. In November of 2020, we reviewed our draft safety targets and methodology with the MPO engineering subcommittee and also with the Iowa DOT. We asked for the help on how we should incorporate COVID-19 impacts and the reduction in vehicle miles traveled. Now in January 2021, we're reviewing our preliminary targets with the MPO committees. We're also finalizing any 2020 crash data and also VMT data into a report. Then next month, we'll bring back the final report and the final safety targets for the MPO committees to vote. If you have any questions on these safety performance targets, I can take them at this time.
Joe?
Z, thank you. Any questions, comments?
I have a quick comment. I've voiced this before. I don't like voting on a target that we're going to have 31 plus fatalities. But I realize we have to submit something. Todd, it's my recollection that we've always, or in recent years, at least put a statement in there on behalf of the board that, you know, we do this work with the goal of 0 fatalities. But because the state requires us to submit targets, these are our targets. I just hate making it seem like we're just, you know, that we're gonna high five each other if we stay under 31 fatalities.
Yeah, no, we've done that, yes, Chris. So it said that we don't like the terminology and don't like setting a target, but because of the requirements, we're submitting this, and we'll do that again.
Yeah, in the report, there's also a statement about this as well.
Okay, I'm not sure. Did we get the whole report? If we did, I apologize, but I didn't.
Not yet, because we're still finalizing some of the numbers. We'll have that ready for you next month.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was in there. Thank you.
Yep.
Remind us how these are used. What if you miss it? Do you get penalized for anything?
The MPO does not. It's just a federal requirement. The DOT can, on their performance targets, be penalized on funding, but the MPOs do not get penalized.
So Todd, explain to me the benefit of us doing it and not using the state or the Fed's numbers. What's the benefit of us doing our own study and clarifying what we think is going to be the target? Well,
it gives. We generally use some of the DOT numbers, but when there's a big difference between the DOT number and what we're seeing in a regional, it just gives us a better idea of what's actually happening, and we can use that with our members to see where improvements need to be made on the system. Okay, good to know. Z, thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, we'll move on to item number 7. It's a report on the fiscal year 2022 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget Development. I believe Dylan is going to tackle this one.
Yes, thank you. It's time of year again where we start working on our work program and budget. Just a reminder, this document outlines just the things we're going to do throughout the year, how much it's going to cost, what staff and committees will be involved in, that sort of thing. All of the work that we do does adhere to federal requirements. And supports all the federal requirements that are put upon us. The draft is due in April, and then a final is due June 1st. If you go to the next slide. There listed are the requirements put upon MPOs. So like I said, everything that we do either helps prepare for these, or it's, you know, like the long range plan, there's some things we do after the long range plan as far as studies and work that will then support the next one. And some of those that are just recurring, such as the TIP that we do every year. So the work that we do will largely fit into this. But right now, if you go to the next slide, we're asking for feedback from our member communities on what tasks they would want to see from us. If there's any plans, studies, research, and so forth. We've asked this of the technical committee. We'll continue to ask that and incorporate any comments we get into the document as we put that together. We've heard from Iowa DOT that we should have our federal funding targets for, not for the SDBG that goes out to projects, but for the money that we use for the organization. We should receive that information the first week of February. So once we get that information and can put together a draft, we'll reconvene the Budget and Finance Subcommittee that Mayor Sarah leads and get their feedback, help work with them to put that together before we bring a draft to you in the coming months. If there's any questions or any feedback you'd like to provide to us now, be happy to take that.
Dylan, thank you. Questions or comments? Dylan, just two for me. One, obviously we think the assessment's going to be the same for our communities, correct?
The rate or the actual amount?
The rate.
So we typically do $1 per capita. Last year we did we dropped it by half, so we did 50 cents. So I guess feedback on what you'd like to see there would be helpful.
And I know Mayor Gears had, we've tried to keep that below the dollar and do our best. We've had this discussion before, so I guess we'll just wait to see what your recommendation is. And then,
I think Joe, when we studied this years ago, we kept it at the buck, but we adjusted the census annually based on the DOT numbers.
Yeah.
So that we could capture the additional revenue, but we didn't want to go above a buck. If I remember right, last year we had excess surplus, so we decided to eat into some of the surplus by reducing the assessment.
Yeah, we'll have to look at the numbers of where we're at. We may need to be at the dollar, but we'll come back with the recommendation.
Yeah, and I think last year we did that too because of COVID, and we weren't sure what the impact would be on local communities. So now we might have a better sense of what that is and whether we need to continue doing that or raise it back up to the dollar.
And then one other comment, and Todd, we talked about this earlier today in a different meeting, but with the build grant, we are responsible for that, and we will need a full-time staff person responsible in charge is what they call it. And they're going to need the wherewithal of construction and things to be able to pull this off. You're not looking at any additional staff to add for that project, are you?
Not at this time.
And we'll be able to meet the criteria of the responsible charge, that you have folks that have the knowledge to pull off a construction project like this.
Well, we're working with a couple ideas on how to address that and have a recommendation back to you on how to do that.
Okay. I'm sure we'll hear more about it under the water trails update. So
yeah, we'll talk a little more there too.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to item number 8 is a report on the pavement condition report from Andrew.
Thank you. Before I jump into the report itself, I just have a couple of things to go over. One is that the primary information collected was from 2019 for this report. We could have data collected every 2 years for paved roads in the MPO planning area. The previous iteration was 2017. The next scheduled collection is in 2021. So the point data that's used or collected is used by Intrans at Iowa State to calculate a pavement condition index, or PCI, score for road segments. And note that city and county PCIs are calculated slightly differently. This happened in the 2017 report. The reason for that is county roads traditionally are highways and faster traveled, which means they place a greater emphasis on roughness or that road segment versus local communities that have local roads that's not really as important. But the important thing to note is that they are comparable between the two, just because PCI does give a good general sense of condition of roads in that community. And then lastly, the MPO has been tracking this information, pavement conditions metro-wide, since 2013. In the report on the front page, there's a map that just shows the pavement condition breakdown by road segments across the metro. Also included in there is the table, which is also on the screen before you. A couple of things to note on here. We look at 2 different types of measures for road information. One is average pavement condition index. The other is the percentage of roads in poor or worse condition. Also, we break that down into 2 different time periods. One since 2013, since we have been collecting information since then. And then we also break it down since 2017, which is coincides with our updated Mobilizing Tomorrow plan. So just overall, we set our goal to maintain the road system, understanding that pavement conditions will go up and down over time. And since 2013, we are still a lower as far as pavement condition index, with a 3% drop since then, and also have seen a 6% increase since then on the percentage of poor or worse condition roads. Although since 2017, since we updated Mobilizing Tomorrow, we've rebounded a little bit. We have seen a 5% increase in PCI, and then also 1% decrease in percentage of roads in poor or worse condition. Next slide. On the second page there is also a chart that shows the breakdown of the pavement condition by jurisdiction. At the top there, you can see the MPO overall, and then also the breakdown by community. And for communities that cross the MPO planning area boundary, we'll note that this only includes those road segments within the MPO planning area. Next slide. With this report, there are two new features with this. One is that we also break down PCI over time by the federal functional class. The reason for that is that the regional average PCI tends to be heavily skewed towards local road condition, just because we have a lot more miles of that. But it's also important to note too that there are also different PCIs for the different roadways. So just in general, major arterials will be in better condition and have higher PCI because they're more heavily traveled and have more resources devoted to them. And that always doesn't get fleshed out in what we report, so we want to make note of that. And also, you will note that this report is quite a bit longer than previous iterations. Each community has their own specific page devoted to providing information for that community, which includes a breakdown of the PCI over time as compared to the MPO average for that same time period, but also includes a breakdown by federal functional class for that specific community and in comparison to the MPO average for that federal functional class. The reason for that was we wanted to include more information for jurisdictions that may or may not look at this information as much as MPO staff and larger communities. So with that, if anyone has any questions about the pavement condition report, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions, concerns? All right, we'll move on to item number 9, is report on the transload facility and an update from Zach.
So I'm going to give you a quick update on the transload facility. Staff has, as we've discussed in the past, we've completed all the pre-reimbursement requirements that we had from the FRA. So all those documents have been submitted and approved by the FRA. Based on that, Des Moines Industrial could start submitting reimbursements at any time. However, they've indicated that they probably won't submit their first reimbursement until sometime probably in March of this year. We do have our next quarterly report due to the FRA at the end of the month. So we're currently working with Des Moines Industrial right now to complete that quarterly report. And we'll probably be submitting that within the next week or so, well ahead of the deadline at the end of the month. Des Moines Industrial is wrapping up their agreements with the railroads and with the city of Des Moines. As I mentioned before, they're planning on starting construction in March of 2021. They had been hopeful that they might be able to get some groundwork done in December, but just based on not getting their agreements wrapped up in time to do that, it will probably be March before they start construction activities. They did indicate that if the weather were to cooperate, they might be able to start doing some of that groundwork earlier than March, but right now that's what they're planning on. On the next slide, we've included a rough schedule of the construction activities. It's broken down into several different categories there. But as you can see, most of the main construction activities are scheduled to take place anytime between March and November of 2021. So that's all I have for an update on transload. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Zach, thank you. Any questions for Zach about the transload?
I don't have a question specifically for Zach, but it's more about the attorney's opinion that we received. As a matter of fact, I'll just switch to that here. No, I don't have much confidence in this opinion because of the very last statement that This opinion is limited to the extent of the facts presented by DSMI are accurate. You know, people on the exec committee have asked for an opinion, and it's oddly difficult getting that opinion. And I like to say this one is, to me, it really doesn't say anything. It's all based on the accuracy of the someone else's work, not our attorney. I guess I'd like to find out what everybody else thinks about that.
Any comments from anybody?
This is Stephanie. I actually agree with you, Gary. When I read it, it didn't give me a lot of comfort, but I thought, well, maybe I misunderstood what Sarah was looking for. Yeah, to me, it doesn't look like the attorney did any real research on it. They just kind of took what was given to them. It didn't give me a lot of comfort. I wasn't impressed, I'll say that.
What I would liken this to is if you're buying a house and you've asked your attorney to do a title search on that house, and the seller said everything is clean, the attorney says, I agree with that opinion as long as the seller is correct. I have no confidence in this opinion.
Well, I guess, Todd, I think what Scott was saying is he's relying on Brian Rickards' recitation of the key facts. They seem accurate to me. Can you validate that what Brian relied on is in fact correct from a structural and party standpoint? Because if it is, then I'm fine with Scott's opinion.
I think that's what Scott was going for, Steve, is that was his strategy on that, and also his opinion that their analysis was correct, and that he was agreeing that the construction management at risk was an okay tool to use based on that analysis.
And Scott, from you and your staff standpoint, are the facts that Brian recited accurate?
I see no reason to believe that they're inaccurate. It's just often when, I guess my experience in doing legal opinions is that if they're, if I'm not able to, I wasn't part of the, it wasn't involved at the time they used the construction manager at risk model when they selected. So, I'm assuming that they performed that function appropriately. I just don't know because I wasn't part of it. So that's all that really is intended to do. And we did review the law. We reviewed Brown-Winnick's letter, obviously, but we reviewed the law and some other scholarly articles in reviewing whether Chapter 26 prohibited this, and it was our conclusion that it did not.
And Todd, from your standpoint and your staff standpoint, are the recitation of facts from Brian Rickard correct?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm fine with Scott's.
Yeah, I'm fine with it too. And speaking as a lawyer that has to get a lot of opinions too, you have to rely on what people are presenting to you to make an opinion. That's all Scott was doing, and I had no problem with that.
Well, yeah, and I would assume if Rickard's facts were incorrect and we knew that, Todd, you guys would point that out to Brian.
Correct.
This is Sarah, and I am clearly the one who's been asking for the opinion, and I appreciate finally receiving one on this item. I think for staff and Scott's sake, what is now an issue is just around our process internally as a group, when I'm just simply trying to seek legal opinion and protection so the project is a success and that the MPO is not, accountable down the line, or we're dealing with other legal battles. And so thank you for finally putting your opinion in writing for us. And I hope that we can, maybe address these items a little bit more collaboratively in the future. Because again, this is not about being against the project. This is about making sure we are successful and doing things correctly.
Okay, great discussion. I'm comfortable with the facts being stated by both law offices from Todd and his staff, and I'm comfortable moving forward. I don't know if, this isn't a voting item. We're already down the road, but I agree with, we need to look at our policy. We need to look at our process, and we're gonna do that as we go through this water trails project and make sure that we're gonna move forward and do it right and communicate better with all members, communities about this. Right, Todd?
Yes.
And
Okay.
I would just like it reflected in the minutes that I'm not comfortable with that last sentence in opinion.
Absolutely. We'll put that in the minutes. Thank you. I'm going to listen to the two other attorneys that sit on the executive committee, and I'm going to use their expertise and be comfortable with it. As both of them, practice law. One of them does a lot of different contracts and different things like that. I'm gonna agree that both of them, if they're in agreement with it and they don't have a problem with it, then I'm okay and we're going to move forward.
Steve's a reform lawyer, but
Okay, whatever. Bob, I'm going to agree with you then. I know you're an attorney. Anyway, let's move on to get an update on the Purple Heart Highway on item number 10. If everybody's okay and no one else has any other discussion. All right. Todd, you want to kick us off with this?
Sure, thank you. As you know, we completed the report, had some revisions to it that were finished. Actually, we tweaked it a little bit in November. As you know, conclusions are the same as in 2012. The costs have come down significantly. Next slide. DOT had sent us a letter that I shared with you back on December about forming a task force. I've sent Tony Gustafson a reply to that and saying, we'd be happy to do a task force and work to get this across the finish line. Tony emailed me back Monday saying that Andy was going to coordinate with me and staff on setting that task force up and coordinating on that activity. So we'll be getting together and working with you and some of our partners to get that task force formed up and meeting. Talked with Maggie at Farm Bureau to schedule a meeting date. They had some issues come up this month, so she's asked for it to be next month. Hasn't given me a date yet on that. As soon as I have something, I'll let everyone know. And then we have contacted the governor's office to set up a meeting with the governor. I'll circle back with them this week to try to get back into their radar to get that meeting scheduled.
She's been a little busy.
Yeah, there's been things going on.
Just a few.
I don't know if there's another slide. Nope. That's it. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions for Todd?
This is Sarah. Sorry, I think at the last meeting we talked about having an overview and talking points for our State House elected officials, because many of them have been made aware and they just want talking points on that.
Yeah.
When can we still get that since session has started?
Yeah, we got that together. We'll send that out today to everyone on the committee.
Great.
Yep, we'll get that out.
Good idea. All right, if there's nothing else, we'll move on to item number 11, the water trails update from Todd also.
Thank you. Next slide. The project is working on the original schedule. They're still planning on continuing on that schedule. In the appropriations bill that was signed to extend the federal government's budget, there was a deadline extension on the build grant for 2019 build grants. They actually defunded all the projects and then funded them again, extending the deadline to September 30th of 2022. So that gives us a little more breathing room. But the team wants to continue on the original schedule. as much as possible. So the plans, design work is continuing on that schedule currently. Agreement between the MPO and Federal Highway has been drafted and is sitting in Washington, D.C. For their review. It'll come back to us with comments and then back and forth a little bit and be shared with you after we get Federal Highway's comments. Agreements between the MPO and DOT are underway. The DOT will be letting this project, so we have to have an agreement with them. There will also be agreements between the MPO, Central Iowa Water Trails, City of Des Moines, on how to handle the construction contract, change orders, the construction management and engineering. Polk County may also be involved in that. One of the things we've been talking about, the MPO has to hold the contract and manage the construction contract or be the responsible in charge. We can hire so forth a construction manager. The county's offered to step into that role, or at least talked about it at one point. We were having some conversations with Bob Rice, and he's talking with the supervisors about that. And then they would contract potentially with Snyder or some other engineering firm to do the actual construction engineering piece of it. So that's potentially why we wouldn't need to hire anyone directly at the MPO. We just have agreements with the county and potentially Snyder or whatever engineering firm is selected. Is there another slide, Gunnar? Milestones, design plans be submitted next month, potentially. They're still on track for that. Final plans for review in March, and then the final plans to the DOT in May to get that letting in the fall. Be happy to answer any questions.
Todd, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay.
No, go ahead, please.
Todd, I had sent some questions out to you and our executive members ahead of time. Can you go through those questions?
Yeah, sorry. I meant to pull those up. All right, just give me 1 second. Yeah, so to Sarah's questions, the first question was who owns the $25 million build grant? The MPO owns it. Since we were awarded the grant, we're the responsible agency and have to hold the contract for that. It hasn't been signed yet. What is the financial risk to the organization? Well, certainly if we spent the money and nothing happened, there'd be some risk there. But you know, the Water Trails organization has raised a lot of money to help fund the private portions of this project. So I don't anticipate a lot of risk there. And the maintenance of the project, a lot of discussion about that with the Central Iowa Water Trails Committee. The city is likely to be maintaining the project with some assistance on funding. The Fed and the DOT are pretty comfortable with that type of arrangement. They'd be a little less comfortable if the MPO said it was going to maintain it. But if the city or county or some combination of that has agreed to maintain the project, they're pretty comfortable with that. What is the requirement for maintaining and operating for 20 years? Mainly that the project is in place. A lot of the project cost is safing the dam and some of the park improvements. So those, regardless of the recreational portion of the water trails itself, those will be in operation, so to speak. So I don't know that we'll have a lot of problem meeting that requirement. They don't have a lot of strict definition on what maintain and operate means in their documents to this point. The funding for the management and engineering work that has occurred thus far has been done by Central Iowa Water Trails through the private fundraising. That money, if something happened and everything stopped moving forward, that would just be money that that Central Iowa Water Trails expended through their donations that they've raised. We're working on the agreements as far as mitigating risk to the MPO. A lot of moving parts on those agreements, so we're getting those started, drafting those now, and how we mitigate the MPO will be part of that drafting language. There's going to be 4 to 5 parties involved in those agreements, so it's a complex arrangement, but we're starting to get into the weeds on those, and I'll have more details on those in the next couple of months. Yeah, the MPO hasn't historically sponsored projects of this size, certainly. So there is some liability on that to the MPO and the communities. Most likely, if we had a problem with needing to repay the fund, we would work some arrangement on our STPG funding and not hit the individual communities. We're working through that as part of our agreements with the DOT.
So I hear words like a lot and working on and just very vague language. And what's helpful for me is, and I'm sure others on this board, is understanding actual numbers. You know, for example, I come from the fundraising world, and so there's a difference between money raised and money pledged. You know, if we're working with a nonprofit to back a $25 million build grant loan, do they have $25 million in pocket to back it, or do they have $25 million pledged? Because that's very different. And then I know you just brought up the concept of backing this loan with STPG dollars. My question would then be, does that align with our policy? But also, are we allowed to do that? Because I would seem to me that STPG dollars are dedicated for a specific reason from the federal government. So could we actually do that? And Scott, this is where, and I know we're not going to solve all these questions today, but I look to Scott and you, Todd, to really helping us understand what are these numerical risks being associated with each member of the MPO, because while this is an exciting time, we can't overpromise and misstep and not recognize what our potential risk is, so we can all be prepared and informed.
Sure.
I don't think we have necessarily articulated an exact answer to all these questions, but I hope that we can get there through some thoughtful conversations around dollars. And also, as an executive committee, are we content and working with a nonprofit? Our conversations around transload were very different. That's with a contracted developer. This is their expertise. They were able to secure the loan and be backed with a bond. I don't know what that path looks like for financial stability of the MPO in working with a new nonprofit without any assets. So just throwing these out as things we need to really get our head around.
Yeah, they're good questions. To the Central Iowa Water Trails assets, they've raised in the neighborhood of 20 million. And I think in cash in hand, they're, and Joe, you might have a better number on this, 7 to 8 million right now. They're raising 33 million in total through this process. They're also working on securing some other grants and funding that would go towards not only this project, but the other projects as well. Regarding the STPG funds, we're working with the DOT on that question. I don't have a great answer yet for you because they weren't sure yet on how we could approach that. So we're exploring a lot of different options. Just don't have the answer for you yet.
Okay. And Scott, I think it would be wise for you to really lean in on these conversations, us look at our bylaws and the bill grant, and helping the board as individual members understand our risk and liability.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Good questions. Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got one question just about the project itself. I'm a little confused about. There's two dams. There's a Center Street Dam and a Scott Street Dam. Does
Correct.
this project have anything to do with the Center Street Dam?
No, this project deals with the Scott Street Dam and then the Harriet, Birdland, and
Prospect.
Prospect, thank you. Parks where there's going to be launch stations, essentially. That's what encompasses this project.
So there's no, Scott Street or Center Street is the larger of the two dams.
Yes,
So that will remain the same as it is right now.
currently, I mean, it's kind of the next phase. This is the first phase of the project.
But I guess I'm still a little confused. The Whitewater portion of the trail, is that
Mhm.
Scott Street or Center Street?
They both have whitewater components. The Center Street would have a kind of a higher action level or more extreme whitewater portion, but Scott Street will have a whitewater portion as well. It just won't be as high energy as what will be at Center Street because the drops are not as big.
Anything else, Gary?
I would like, going back to what several people have asked about, to make sure that beyond all the questions about the project and beyond kind of the legal aspects of it, which are all really important, I just would like to see Todd's plan in writing as to how we manage the grant. You know, everything from, you know, who's our expert on Davis-Bacon and who's going to inspect and enforce those kinds of rules. Taking federal money, you know, requires a lot of steps that you don't have to do with other funds. And I think we just want to make sure that, you know, when we take STP and all that, the cities or the county become the sponsor of the projects, and you guys don't have to do any of that. You might know what's going on, but this is going to be a major project, and I don't lack confidence, but I haven't seen details as to how we're going to manage this. And I think it's really, really important that we all know the kind of money and effort that our team is going to have to invest in it. And I'd like to know that all the other partners agree that we're going to pull money out of the budget for such management.
Yeah, no, we should have some more of that for you next month, Chris. That's part of the discussions we've had the last couple of weeks and this week with Central Iowa Water Trails, the county, and some other parties. So, and the DOT for that matter. So we'll have more of that for you next month.
Yeah, because at this point, Todd, we hold it. I mean, we're going to be doing change orders. We're going to be, you know, paying out the contractors. We're going to be doing all of that. And so we do, I mean, all the members are going to need to see a plan of how you're going to pull that off and what the plan is. So the sooner the better that we're able to communicate that to everyone. I think the sooner the better everyone maybe tries to get a little bit more comfortable with it. Sure. Since it's new for us at the MPO, it's new for you.
Yeah. No, certainly.
Good discussions. Anyone else? We'll move on to item number 12. It's a legislative update from Dylan.
Thank you. A few things to tell you about here. Late last month in December, Congress passed the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. And this act had several things into it. It was the continuation of funding for the federal government, but it was also partially the economic stimulus relief bill. So from a transportation perspective, it provided the remainder of the 2021 appropriations because that was only funded on a short-term basis, so it funded the rest of the year. It provided another $1 billion for the next round of build for that program. And then in terms of economic relief, it provided $10 billion in SDBG funds to the US DOT, and it stipulated that 15% or 1.5 billion be provided to TMAs or MPOs over 200,000 in population by formula. And that money is 100% federal. There's no match required to that. So we will be seeing some amount of SDBG coming to us because we are an MPO over 200,000, but we haven't seen the actual numbers of what that is or if there's any other stipulations tied to that it has to be spent in a certain amount of time or things of that nature. There was additional money provided to transit, 14 billion for public transit and 2 billion for airports as well. Again, I haven't seen the details of what DART and the Des Moines Airport will receive from that. And as Todd mentioned in the previous item, the timeline for the 2019 build grants, which is the Water Trails grant for us, was extended out by a year. So that's what we know from the federal side. On the state side, something that hasn't been introduced yet, but it's been circulating, is that, and it's not transportation, but it's a stormwater that we talk about a lot, is the Home Builders Association has proposed a bill, as it says there, that would basically preempt a city or county from doing anything that goes beyond the federal or state requirements. So some of our communities have topsoil requirements or things of that nature. It would say that that can't be done anymore. So we're looking to get more information on this. I just received something from Capital Crossroads and the partnership wanting to get a meeting on this. So we'll know here more in the coming weeks. And this will probably be introduced as a formal bill pretty soon, we'd imagine. And that's what I have for you.
Thanks, Dylan.
I've got a comment on what Dylan was just talking about there. I think that the MPO needs to take a position, and you just said you're getting more information. I appreciate that. But just the communities that are represented here by the MPO have different situations as far as topography, where the stormwater goes, how it goes, and why the federal, and I mean, I know why, it's because the homeowners association is or home builders association is pushing this. But I think that the state and federal laws here need to be looked at as a minimum standard. And that if you're going over that, it's for a reason. I mean, take Ankeny, for example. I mean, Ankeny is pool table flat. I mean, it's hard for the water to go anywhere. And stormwater runoff is probably one of our top 3 or 4 complaints that we hear from our citizens. So I know that we've gone above the state, I don't know about the federal law, but I know we've gone above the state law. And it's just going to push this right back onto everybody's citizens here. They're also going after, the Builders Association is going after, well, the term escapes me right now, building standards. If your community has gone over and above the minimum for building standards, they're going after that under the guise that this increases the cost of a house, which it probably does, but it's not going to, and they're going to draw their logic is that if they don't have to do that, the cost of the house is reduced, but the price of the house is, well, I would be very surprised if that was ever reduced. So I think that as an MPO, we've got a lot at stake in this legislation here. And I think that as an MPO, we need to make our voice heard on that.
Yeah, as more progresses with this, we'll make sure to bring that to you. And if we need to take any formal action, we'll do that.
All right, anyone else? Dylan, thank you. Item number 13 is a report on upcoming events by Gunnar.
Good morning, everyone. Gunnar here. Just want to make sure you're aware of a handful of upcoming events that may be of interest to you or others on your staff. What is usually the annual dinner in quote normal times is being held tomorrow as the DSM 21 kickoff. Details on the screen there. You should be able to find that pretty quickly if it's not of your inbox already. Also want to bring to your attention the 2021 Safe Routes to School conference coming up later this month. This is a one-day session that's free and online. And it is leads into the Iowa Bicycle Summit, which is the following 2 days, the 29th and 30th. There's a few different tracks here, or a couple different tracks that you can take here with varying prices depending on how you're using it either as an advocate or as continuing education. Also want to make you aware of the Smart Growth America's Equity Summit coming up later this month. Lastly, I would draw your attention to the rain garden training that is happening early February. This is free and online on February 11th and 12th. And this is going to cover all manner of things related to rain gardens. This has been one of the more popular components of the rain campaign for people in places like Ankeny where they have stormwater issues are very real. So that's it for me, unless you have, oh wait, I see somebody has added one for me here. The partnership trip has been scheduled for this fall. Just a heads up that those are the dates being looked at right now. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you. Item number 14 is the approval on the policy committee agenda.
Joe, I was wondering if you just wanted to pull the report on the executive director item, since we'll bring that back next month.
Yeah, I would take that off, and I would entertain a motion without that on our policy committee meeting.
And I apologize, Joe, did we skip over the sub area rep conversation? Because I have an update from the Eastern sub area.
That'll be a non-action item.
Yeah,
Yes, Todd had
That's the
sent
next
out.
one.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
I'll move the agenda as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Other non-action items of interest to the committee? Go ahead, Mayor, or Todd, or whoever else wants to jump in.
And I know Todd had sent out an email about Kyle Mertz no longer being on MPO board, and I did coordinate with the other cities in this region. I encourage them to reach out and email Todd Ashby directly, but that should be myself and Councilwoman Elizabeth Burns Thompson from Altoona.
Yeah, we did get that, or I did get that, so we'll have that. We're sending out a notice to the other sub areas to get their reps lined out.
Right.
The other action item, just wanted to mention that FHWA and FTA have reached out to us. It's that time for our quadrennial review of the MPO. We'll be doing that review the last week of April. We'll be pulling together various information for FHWA and FTA to look at before that the 26th, but they'll come, or probably doing it virtually, I guess, according to Darla from FHWA, doing a couple day sessions on that review, but we'll keep you posted as we get closer to that. And then lastly, we want to just touch on some of the progress to date on the Environmental Justice Committee. So Allison's going to touch on that.
Thanks. Just to give you an update, we did meet with the Environmental Justice Committee just before the Christmas holiday. They did ask us to explore a couple different options. So staff is working on mapping that data right now, and we will pull the group back together in February to review the outcomes of that and discuss next steps. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you. And I appreciate the extra time that folks are spending on that. I think it's important that we take care of it, do it right. Todd, do you have anything else?
No, sir.
All right, our next meeting date is February 10th at 11:30 for the exec. And then our policy meeting's next Thursday, correct?
Yes.
All right. There's nothing else. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you for everybody attending. Someday we'll get back in person, I promise.
Mhm.
Maybe
Yep.
before my tenure as the chair will be up. Who knows?
Hopefully.
Have a great day.
Good job,
See you,
Joe.
everybody.
Thank you.